The baby clothes were still hanging in the hallway. Not mine. Not ours. She doesn't even want children. And yet there they were, soft little onesies, yellow and green, still with the tags on, swinging gently from a wire hanger hooked onto our wedding photo. Our wedding photo. I stood there for a good minute, trying to convince myself I was dreaming. I had just come home from a business trip 2 days early. No warning. No calls. I wasn't being romantic. I wasn't trying to surprise her. I just didn't trust her anymore. The house smelled different. Less like her usual vanilla candles, more like musky cologne and citrus body spray. I'm not a detective, but I've also never been an idiot. I walked in knowing something was wrong. I just didn't expect to see baby clothes. When she walked out of the bathroom, still towel drying her hair, her eyes met mine and froze. No panic, just calculation. Like she was flipping through a mental Rolodex of excuses, looking for the least insulting one. Before I could even say a word, she beat me to it. "You shouldn't be home right now," she said coldly, wrapping the towel around herself like I was the intruder. "You were supposed to come back Friday. No hug. No kiss. No, I missed you." Just annoyance that her script got interrupted. I looked at the onesies again. Then she rolled her eyes. "It's not what you think." God, if I had $1 for every time she said that. I walked toward the photo, took the baby clothes down slowly, and held them up like they were evidence in a murder trial. "Are you pregnant?" I asked, but my voice cracked halfway through. She scoffed. Scoffed. Like the question itself was offensive. "Lol," she said, and that tone, that condescending therapist voice she always used when I dared to question her. "Even if I were, it's my body. My choice. You don't get to have a meltdown just because you weren't consulted." I didn't say anything. I just looked at her. Really looked. And for the first time in 6 years of marriage, I saw her for exactly who she was. She wasn't scared. She wasn't guilty. She was untouchable. That was the moment. Not the texts I'd seen months earlier. Not the late-night walks that didn't show up on her step counter. Not the cryptic phone calls she took in the garage while pretending she was on hold with tech support. No, this was the moment I left her. Not with shouting. Not with violence. Just silence. My bag was still packed from the trip. I grabbed it, slid my wedding ring onto the kitchen counter, and stepped out the front door. She didn't follow. She didn't cry. The last thing I heard before it shut behind me? Good. Now I don't have to explain anything. She was right. Because whatever story she's been spinning for the people still in her life, she won't have to explain a single thing to me ever again. I didn't drive far. Just far enough. I sat in a gas station parking lot for almost an hour, engine running, phone in my hand, thumb hovering over her contact name. Not to yell. Not to beg. I needed her to say something. Anything. Something that would let me believe I had imagined it all. But she didn't call. She didn't text. And after 47 minutes and 12 seconds of pure, teeth-grinding silence, I finally shut the car off and drove to the only person who ever told me the truth about her, my sister. Nadine never liked Callista. She tolerated her, sure, but only out of politeness. The moment I told her I'd proposed, she looked me dead in the eye and said, "You're not her partner, lol. You're her project." I laughed then, thought she was just being dramatic. But now I was sitting on her old floral couch, shaking like a leaf, telling her what I'd seen, what she'd said, and how I walked out. Nadine didn't say, "I told you so." She didn't need to. She just poured me a glass of iced tea and asked, "You ready to know what I've been keeping from you?" Turns out, Callista had been slipping long before I noticed. A mutual friend, someone we both knew from church, back when she still pretended to believe in something, had spotted her at a rooftop bar 3 months ago. Not with coworkers, not with girlfriends, with a man, handsy, drunk, kissing like teenagers behind a locked booth curtain. And this wasn't a one-time thing. Same guy, multiple sightings. Once outside a spa, once in the parking lot of a fertility clinic. A fertility clinic. My heart thudded in my chest. "Wait, she told me she didn't want kids," I said, voice barely above a whisper. Nadine looked away. "That's what she told you." That night, I did something I never thought I'd do. I messaged the guy. Well, his wife, actually. See, I remembered a name from one of the texts I'd accidentally seen a few months back. Denny, she'd called him. I found a woman with the last name Mavis who had tagged him in a Christmas post. I took a shot and messaged her. I told her I thought our spouses were involved. I expected rage, threats, accusations. Instead, I got a message that made my stomach hit the floor. You too. That's all she said. It was like a shotgun blast to the chest. Turns out, she'd been dealing with the same ghosts. Late nights, sudden gym routines, locked phones, business trips to the same cities. We talked for 2 hours. She even sent me a photo she'd taken, grainy, taken from across a restaurant patio, but unmistakable. There was my wife, laughing like she hadn't laughed in years, laughing at something he said, and on the table between them, a sonogram photo. When I say the ground dropped out beneath me, I'm not being dramatic. I literally had to sit down before I passed out. My wife, my independent, child-free, career-driven, don't ask me questions wife, was pregnant. By another man. Planning a life. Smiling about it. I called her that night. First time since I walked out. She answered on the second ring like nothing had happened. Lol, she said. If this is about the onesies. I didn't let her finish. You're pregnant, Callista. And I know it's not mine. So tell me now, and tell me the truth. Are you planning to raise this baby with him while you're still legally married to me? There was a pause. Then she exhaled. I was going to tell you eventually, she said, her voice flat. But I didn't think you'd take it well. So yes, I'm moving on. I've been out of this marriage for a long time, lol. You're just catching up. She hung up. I sat in the dark staring at the call screen, listening to the quiet tick of the wall clock in Nadine's living room. And in that moment, something inside me just stopped. Whatever I'd been clinging to, hope, pain, denial, it just broke loose and drifted off. I wasn't going to fight her anymore. I wasn't going to cry into pillows or listen to sad playlists or ask what I did wrong. No, I was going to burn the whole lie down the quiet way. Paperwork, proof, closure. The storm was coming. But she had no idea I was already collecting thunder. I didn't sleep that night. Not a minute. I just lay there on Nadine's couch staring at the ceiling fan, watching it spin like my brain. Over and over, the same loop, her voice saying, I've been out of this marriage for a long time. I wasn't even mad. I was hollow. I felt like a placeholder in my own story, like she'd left the relationship months ago but forgot to mention it to me. Or maybe she enjoyed keeping me around as emotional spare change. Either way, I was done being her backup plan. The next morning, I emailed my attorney. Yes, I had one. I'd quietly retained her 2 months earlier when the late-night walks and new lingerie started to feel a little too rehearsed. Best decision I ever made. I wasn't a fighter by nature. I'm more of a curl-up with tea and cry during Pixar movies kind of guy, but I had learned something about pain. It either destroys you, or it wakes you up. I was finally, painfully awake. I told my lawyer everything. Every detail. The sonogram photo, the affair, the texts, the baby clothes in my house. She listened without interrupting, and then said the one sentence that stuck with me. Lol, if you keep playing nice, she'll walk away with everything and leave you with the wreckage. That flipped a switch in me. Fallon could live whatever version of freedom she wanted, but not on my dignity, and not on my dime. Meanwhile, I kept up appearances. I didn't message her, didn't confront her again. I knew she was waiting for a fight. That's what people like her live for, drama, reactions, theatrics. But I gave her silence. Radio silence. The kind that creeps under your skin when you're expecting fireworks, and all you hear is a clock ticking. I started collecting documents, bank transfers, car payments, travel records. I logged everything, dated every receipt, even pulled location data off our shared cloud backup. She hadn't just been unfaithful, she'd been stupid about it. But here's the part one didn't expect. 2 weeks later, she showed up at Nadine's house. Unannounced. Middle of the afternoon, pounding on the front door like the building was on fire. I was halfway through folding laundry in sweatpants and socks when I heard her voice. Loud, sharp, shaking. Lol, I know you're in there. Nadine peeked through the blinds and gave me this deadpan look like, you want me to throw her into the bushes? I told her no. I'd handle it. When I opened the door, Fallon didn't look smug like usual. She looked scared. Her makeup was smudged, her hands trembling just enough to notice. I didn't say a word. I just leaned against the frame and waited. What are you doing? She snapped. Why haven't you called me? Why are you talking to people I know? So that was it. She'd found out about the other wife. The message. The photo. Probably the lawyer, too. I said nothing. Just looked at her like I was watching a stranger have a meltdown in the street. Her voice cracked when she said the next part. Are you seriously divorcing me? It was the first time I'd seen her rattled. And it was only the beginning. I didn't answer her question right away. I just stood there, watching her shift from rage to confusion, then back again. She was used to one version of me. The quiet husband who flinched when she raised her voice, who apologized when he hadn't done anything wrong, who waited for permission to feel betrayed. But that version of me died the moment I saw her smirking at a sonogram photo that didn't belong to us. She stepped forward like she was going to walk inside. I didn't move. You don't get to just ignore me, Lowell. This isn't how adults handle things. You don't get to make decisions behind my back. That made me laugh. A short, dry laugh I didn't recognize as mine. I shook my head. You really think you're the victim here? She recoiled a little. I'm not the villain either. This was never black and white. You checked out years ago, Lowell. You stopped being present. I needed more than what you were giving me. There it was. The excuse. The classic you made me do it argument. Like I'd driven her into someone else's arms by being boring. Predictable. Emotionally safe. I let her speak. I wanted to hear every twisted version of the truth she'd been telling herself. You and I were done long before this, she said. I just didn't know how to say it without hurting you. Right, I said flatly. So instead you got pregnant with another man's child and hoped I'd just fade away. She swallowed hard. I didn't plan it. It just happened. Did you plan the fertility clinic visits too? Or was that another spontaneous moment of self-discovery? That shut her up. She looked down at her feet, biting the inside of her cheek the way she always did when she'd been caught. A full 30 seconds passed before she said anything. And when she did, it came out quieter than I expected. I didn't think you'd leave. That sentence hit harder than I thought it would. She really didn't. She thought I'd stay. Thought I'd fold, the way I always did. That I'd keep the lights on while she lived her double life, babysitting her freedom until she decided what came next. But the silence I gave her wasn't weakness. It was a warning. I already filed, I said. You'll get the papers soon. I won't contest anything that's fair. But I'm not going to sit around while you rewrite the narrative. Her face went pale. You're serious? Yes. For once in this marriage, I am. She stood there a moment longer, like she didn't know whether to scream or beg. But in the end, she just turned around, walked back to her car, and drove off without saying another word. But that wasn't the end of it. Because 2 days later, someone else knocked on the door. Someone I never expected to see. And what he said changed everything. I thought I was done being surprised. I thought the worst was over. I thought I had seen every layer of the lie she'd built. But that was before I opened the door and came face to face with him, the other husband, Denny Mavis, the man whose wife was carrying my wife's baby. He looked nothing like I expected. No designer beard, no gym-sculpted arms, no smug expression. He looked tired, wrung out, hair messy, button-up shirt half untucked like he'd been pacing in his car before walking up to my door. For a second, neither of us said anything. Just two wrecked men standing in the aftermath of the same hurricane. Finally, he spoke. You're Lowell, right? I nodded. He let out a breath and said, we need to talk. Not about her. About the baby. That sentence dropped into the pit of my stomach like a lead weight. We sat outside on the porch, two strangers connected by betrayal. He didn't dance around it. He told me straight. Callista had blocked his number. Told him she needed space. Claimed she wasn't ready to decide anything. But then she went silent. And Denny, fearing he was about to be erased from the picture completely, had started looking for anyone who could give him answers. He wanted to know if she had told me she was keeping the child. If she had told me that he, Denny, was out of the picture. I told him the truth. I hadn't seen her since she walked away from Nadine's porch. But what he said next made me grip the armrest so tight my knuckles ached. She told my wife I forced her. I blinked. What? She told my wife I manipulated her into getting pregnant. That she was never willing. That I was obsessed. The rage that hit me was immediate. Not just because it was another lie, but because it was so predictable. Callista never lost. She never admitted wrong. And when cornered, she'd always rewrite the narrative to make herself the victim. I told Denny he needed to protect himself. Get everything in writing. Don't trust her word. We exchanged numbers and agreed to keep each other updated. As he was leaving, he turned and said something that stayed with me long after the door closed. She's not just burning down your life, Lowell. She's building a new one with the same match. Be careful she doesn't light it all again. That night, I went back through everything. All the old emails, receipts, documents. I started compiling them into a file, a timeline. If she was going to turn this into a war, I wasn't going in unarmed. I didn't want revenge. I wanted to be free. But what I didn't know was that she had already filed first. And the version of the story in her filing? It painted me as the abuser. I thought I was a step ahead. Turns out, I was already 2 steps behind. The envelope came on a Wednesday. Thick. Certified. My hands shook as I opened it, even though I already knew what it was. What I didn't know was how bad it would be. The documents weren't just divorce papers. They were accusations, twisted, targeted, and absolutely nuclear. She claimed I had emotionally isolated her, that I had been controlling, manipulative, possessive, that I was mentally volatile, and, here's the kicker, expressed hostility toward the idea of pregnancy and bodily autonomy. She was trying to flip the narrative on its head, to weaponize my silence, my confusion, and my heartbreak into a courtroom strategy. She wanted to walk away clean, with sympathy, and maybe even some kind of settlement, while I was left choking on a version of the story I didn't recognize. It was like reading a script from a movie where the villain wore my face. I called my lawyer immediately. She read the packet quietly, asked a few questions, and then said what I feared most. We need to respond fast, and we need to be careful. This isn't just divorce anymore. This is reputation warfare. That night, I couldn't sit still. I couldn't eat. I kept replaying every moment from the past 6 months, wondering how many times she was setting me up without me knowing. Every time she pushed me to lose my temper. Every argument where she suddenly hit record on her phone. Every calm down that made me feel like the bad guy for being human. It all made sense now. She had been preparing for this, grooming the story, leaving breadcrumbs for the legal system to follow. She wasn't just cheating on me. She was rewriting me. I sat on the edge of Nadine's guest bed and stared at my phone. I opened the shared drive I'd been building, the one with receipts, location data, messages she didn't realize synced automatically. I started sorting it all into folders. By date, by location, by lie. I added a copy of the sonogram photo from the patio, the screenshots Denny's wife had sent, the security cam footage from our home where Callista came and went during her solo retreats. It was all there. Quiet, undeniable truth. She had her story, but I had reality. Just as I finished labeling the last folder, my phone lit up. It was her. The text was short, surgical, and so cold it felt like a slap. If you drag this out, I'll make you regret it. Just sign. That was the moment I knew something else was coming. Something worse than accusations. She wasn't just trying to leave me. She was trying to erase me. I didn't respond to her text. I refused to give her the satisfaction of knowing she got under my skin. But inside, I was unraveling. Her threat wasn't just a warning, it was a promise. She wanted me gone. Not just legally, not just emotionally, but historically. Like I was some failed footnote in her glossy rebrand. And she wasn't bluffing. 2 days later, I got an email from an HR department I didn't recognize. It was formal, sterile, and devastating. Someone had submitted an anonymous report to my employer's ethics committee. Allegations of inappropriate behavior, emotional instability, and offensive conduct outside the workplace. It didn't take long to figure out where it came from. I hadn't done any of it, of course, but I knew she didn't care about facts. Only outcomes. I nearly vomited. My job was the last thing I had left that was mine. I was the quiet guy in IT who helped people fix printer errors and backed up server files like it was religion. I never even flirted with a coworker. I barely even socialized. But none of that mattered. In a world where image is everything, an accusation is a stain you can't scrub off. I called my lawyer again. She told me to hold the line. That this kind of tactic is more common than people think in messy separations. That this is how people like Callista operate. They throw bombs and hope something sticks before anyone checks for fingerprints. We'll respond legally, she said. But in the meantime, I need you to be smarter than your instincts. So I went still. I didn't fight her. I didn't rant online. I didn't storm her apartment or show up at her new guy's job. I waited. I documented. I stayed quiet. Because this wasn't about pride anymore. This was about survival. But while I was doing damage control, she was working on her masterpiece. She started making social media posts. Subtle ones. Cryptic. Always just vague enough to be defensible, but clear enough to target me. Things like, healing from silent abuse is still healing. Or, some people use kindness as a weapon. Don't fall for it. Then came the photos. Her with her hand on her stomach. Her smiling next to Denny, but only tagging locations, never people. Always implying, never confirming. It was a campaign. A curated drip of revisionist history designed to cast her as the brave, reborn heroine, and me as the villain she escaped. It would have worked, too, if she hadn't made one mistake. She used a quote in a post. A quote that wasn't hers. A quote that came from a private conversation I'd had with her years ago about my mother. Something I'd never said online, never texted, never posted anywhere. And that's when I realized something I never expected. She was still reading my private journal. The one I kept on my old tablet. The one I used to help process the hell she'd put me through. The one she'd promised she'd never open. She'd been accessing it the entire time. Even now, that discovery, that she was still reading my private journal, should have broken me. But it didn't. It clarified everything. She hadn't moved on. She hadn't built some powerful new life like she wanted the world to believe. No, she was still clinging to the last piece of control she had over me. Even after destroying our marriage, smearing my name, and rewriting our history, she was still obsessed with how I felt about her. That was the crack in her perfect image. And I slipped right through it. I locked the tablet, wiped it, closed the drive. It felt symbolic somehow, like pulling the final thread from a sweater that never fit right. But I wasn't done. Not yet. With the help of my lawyer and some quiet digital forensics, we were able to trace the anonymous HR report back to her. The same with the coordinated smear campaign online. The evidence was strong enough to submit a cease and desist letter, and suddenly, all her cryptic posts disappeared overnight. I didn't hear from my employer again after that. Turns out, when people like her realize they might be held accountable, they shrink fast. I finalized the divorce without fanfare. No drawn-out courtroom drama. No last-minute apology. Just documents, signatures, and silence. And it was beautiful. It was peace. But here's the part one didn't expect, the good part. A few months after everything settled, I started volunteering at a community tech program for teens. Just a couple hours a week, teaching kids how to build websites or recover old hard drives. It gave me purpose, routine. And in the middle of all that, I met someone. Her name was Brenna. Quiet, smart, kind in a way that wasn't performative. She didn't ask about my past. She didn't pry. She just sat next to me one day and said, "You seem like someone who listens before he talks." We started having coffee after sessions, then longer conversations, then long walks. No big gestures, no pressure, just quiet, consistent presence. And for the first time in years, I wasn't walking on emotional eggshells. I wasn't wondering if my reality was being twisted behind my back. I wasn't apologizing for existing. One night, as we sat watching the sun dip behind the library parking lot, she asked, "Do you still talk to your ex?" I shook my head. "She doesn't exist in my world anymore." She smiled. "Good, because I think the real you deserves to be seen." So yeah, my wife said, "It's my body, my choice," and she was right. But I had a choice too. I chose peace over punishment, dignity over destruction. And when the storm cleared, I chose to live, really live, for me. And I've never looked back.